Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the CKC channel. I'm your host, FIDE Master Kelvin Klassen. And yes, welcome to another episode of Reflections, Season 3. We've had quite a nice run up to now for I think this is maybe probably our fourth or fifth episode. I'm sure Dr. Boa can give us the exact number for Season 3. And this evening we have a very special guest. He's a professor of psychology and he's also an author of many books. And I'll leave the full introduction to Dr. Boa, but I am going to be listening very tentatively. So um, if you have questions, throw your questions in early in the chat box. Uh, Lots of our viewers tend to throw the questions in late, and then please don't be disappointed if you don't get to them. So try to throw them in early. We're gonna attend to those questions in about 20 minutes into the interview, and then later on we might look at some games. So also, if you are new to the channel, don't forget to press the follow button. And welcome to everyone. So we are going to switch over now to Dr. Boa for the proper introduction. Over to you, Dr. Boa.
Good evening, Fidemas and Calvin Clausen, and also to the viewers tonight. It's great being here. And as Calvin has said, this is season 3. And just to recap for a moment, we had Lawrence Ball all the way from England. After Lawrence, we had Mr. International Master Johannes Mabusela from Atteridgeville, Pretoria. And then Johannes was followed by Grandmaster Alexis Strikovic from Spain, originally from Serbia. And then after that, we had Professor Daim Shabazz from the University of Tallahassee in Florida last week. And this week, it's a great pleasure to introduce someone that I got to know this year through his writings. And Professor Barry Hymer, it's really a great pleasure to have you here. We know that you're going to tell us a bit about your work you're doing for the website at the moment that you're going to tell us about. And then to the viewers, Calvin, I just want to say that earlier this year, I picked up a wonderful book. And I must tell you, Professor Hymer, I'm now on page 200. It's called Chess Improvement. It's all in the mindset, written by Professor Barry Hymer, assisted by Peter Wells and Tim Kitt, Tim is also from South Africa. And welcome to Professor Barry Hymer. It's great having you on the show, and thank you for agreeing to be interviewed tonight.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bow. It's a great privilege to be here. Thank you.
Now, I must say that when I looked at the book at Exclusive Books, I thought to myself, I don't really know these guys. I know Peter Wells, and I didn't know Tim Kitt at the time. But through lockdown, we also got to know each other through WhatsApp groups as well. And Prof, I'm so glad that I started reading your book because it has given me tremendous insight. But your book, we're going to talk, I got that at question 7. I first want to know, did someone teach you chess in Pretoria and then you moved to Cape Town? Tell us how it started.
Thank you, Lyndon. I actually learned chess from a family friend between Pretoria and Cape Town. We were moving from Pretoria in about 1973, late 1973, and we took a long trip down. My father at that time was a minister of religion at Rosebank Methodist Church in Cape Town, and he was just taking up his new position there. And on the way down, we stayed with some family friends, and they had a student friend with them, and he taught me the moves, and I fell in love with the game, and picked it up then when I arrived in Cape Town, and by total accident, I went to a school which had a very long chess history. Because the chess club was led by a very distinguished chess player, Kenneth Kirby, the late Kenneth Kirby.
And Prof, thanks for that. And of course, if I listen to 73, that is the post-Fischer boom that was sort of in the offing after his great triumph in September 72. Prof, when you discovered that Keith Kirby was your school teacher, and I noted, was it Latin that he taught? Tell us a bit about Mr. Kirby.
Yeah, Mr. Kirby was one of the great inspirers of chess in the 1970s and 1980s in Western Province, schools chess in particular. And I can't tell you what a thrill it was when I read the book My 60 Memorable Games to find my old Latin and history teacher's name there. He's actually mentioned by Bobby Fischer in one of his annotations. And so yes, he was a wonderful man. Never gave you any praise. You never knew if you were pleasing him with a move or disappointing him. But he regularly, day in, day out, turned up at the chess club and stood alongside our games, tapping his fingers and sighing deeply if we made a bad move, and just occasionally grunting in approval if he thought our move was okay. But yeah, a remarkable teacher, a remarkable man.
No, thanks for that, Prof, because one of the things, of course, is that I indicated to Calvin earlier this week that I actually received some of the recording books of Piet Kruin, who sadly passed away about 2 months ago, and I'd started with Victor Sturgo and Jacques Furk, my brother-in-law, to actually now type in some of those games, and it's interesting that I'm now experiencing a journey going back in time with South African chess, which is of course great as well. And Prof, Mr. Kirby is mentioned in those green books of the SA chess player quite frequently.
Yeah, he was a regular contributor. Him and Wolfgang Heidenfeld, Kurt Dreyer, previously Jack Wolpert, they were some of the mainstays. Obviously, Leonard Wheatstein was the editor of that magazine, which was, a magazine which nurtured chess players at that time. It's, there's something I remember waiting for, this brown envelope arriving, and I'd be so excited. My schoolwork went out the window when that came, and I'd wade my way through all the games, most of which had bad typos in them, but you just about managed to get through the games, and it was a great result.
Yes. No, fantastic stuff there. Now in the 70s, in my recollection, Miguel Najdorf came to play the SA Open in Cape Town. Michael Steen came to play the SA Open. Did you participate in some of those events since you were living in Cape Town?
I did. I was there at the Arthur Seat Hotel in Sea Point in 1976 at the SA Open, and Miguel Najdorf was there. I looked at him. He was a hero. David Freegood, the South African player, was there. I looked at him as a hero. Michael Steen was there. I was a schoolboy, but the closest I came to them was sharing a urinal, where I found myself standing between the two of them and trying to mind my own business and aiming straight whilst they talked about Fischer's behavior in Porto Ross. But that's as close as I came to playing them.
No, of course. I must tell you, Prof, that this weekend I played a tournament in the wilderness in the George area, and one of the interesting things was that I think I was in the hall where the first SA Open was played in '62, and Harry Golombek and Count Alberic Kelly won the event, and then in the same hall in '64, Lothar Schmidt won the SA Open with 11 out of 11. So it was interesting for me to go sort of back in time, and I told the folks, 60 years ago, we had grandmasters playing in the SA Open right here, and there you're also confirming that you were participating in those years. Now, did you play at school level? I mean, who were your competitors at school level in schoolboy chess?
Yes, I played at school level. In fact, the SA Open in '76 was my first entry into an open tournament. But I played schoolboy chess from standard 6 onwards. And the people I played against there, some of them you've had on your program in earlier series. People like Fasih Mani, who was a hero to us, a really impressive guy. He was a couple of years older than me, very quiet, very modest, but very strong. And we used to kind of watch his games with great respect. One of his big rivals at that time was Howard Goldberg. There were other really strong players like Paul Goldberg, Leslie London, Andrew Blenko, a number of strong players in those kind of early to mid '70s years, and it was great. Wayne Burson, who left chess sadly, but went on to very considerable things in the business world. So these were my contemporaries of that time, and really good bunch of people.
No, fantastic stuff. Because of course, when I listened to you, Mr. Fasih Mani, of course, was mentioning his win against Howard Goldberg, which he was very passionate about, as well, with knight takes e6 in that match as well. And in fact, I visited Howard at his house about 2 weeks ago, and I'm hoping to get him on the show to talk about chess and boxing a bit as well.
Wonderful.
Because
I actually watched that game live, and I remember it to this day. Not all the moves, but it was great seeing Fasih playing through that game, which blew us all away when we were watching it at the time.
No, fantastic stuff. Now, now, Prof, if I think about it, we now in 76, and then at a certain time you had those Oudemeester 79 and 81, where Korchnoi, Nunn, Hubner, Anderson, Lane, and others played. And my recollection from reading those books is that they played at the Baxter Theatre at certain.
Correct.
Did you go watch those games?
Not only was I watching them, I was running a demonstration board. One of those, this again was through Mr. Kirby, who created great opportunities. And if I recall correctly, he was the tournament director of the Cape Town leg, at least, of those great events. And I was running a demonstration board between Lane and Korchnoi, and my good friend Stephen Devereaux was running the board. I think miles against one of the other great, might have been Ulman Unzuka. And I remember Miles just needing huge amounts of milk. Stephen was running off from the board every few minutes and fetching more cold milk, and Miles was drinking loads and loads of this stuff. The behavior of Korchnoi and Line was much more ordinary. It was a grandmaster draw. At the end, I went up to get the autographs, but Korchnoi was already off the stage. But Line gave me actually his copy. So to this day, I've got his signed copy with Korchnoi of his game. Not a great game. I think it was a 17-move grandmaster draw, but still a great record. Great events though.
No, of course. I was actually thinking of going to revisit those games there, because not a lot of players in South Africa actually realized that those tournaments were actually category 16 and were considered top tournaments at the time.
Absolutely. The one in particular, the four-way tournament between Ulf Anderson, Hubner, Nunn, and Korchnoi. Well, there weren't many tournaments in the world at that time which had that strength, that category of opposition. And immediately after that, Anderson came down to Cape Town. That was held in Joburg, I think. Anderson came down and held a couple of similes. I got to play in one of them and actually managed to draw against him. So I was thrilled at that stage. I was an undergraduate at that time, 1981, wow. If I recall.
Prof, I must say that at that stage, my understanding was that Victor Korchnoi was probably number 2 in the world behind Karpov.
Yeah.
So I mean, for that must have been a great experience to just realize here's the great Victor playing in our backyard as well.
And Anderson was number 3, if I recall correctly, at that time, and almost impossible to beat. He had that kind of Karpov-like ability to play such sublime positional chess that he was almost unbeatable. But Korchnoi, he was already a legend, of course, at that time, and became even more so as the years went by. Wonderful opportunity.
No, for certain. No, I kind of enjoy reading about those stories as well, and his great battles. One of my first books that I actually read was the 78 match in the Philippines, against Karpov. And then, of course, after that, I had bought 2 books. The second one was called Massacre in Merano. And of course, we know that one didn't go too well for Korchnoi. But now, Prof, I was reading between your bio and your book, and somehow I found out that you played for Eastern Province at the Rentmeester at some stage. Now, you know that Calvin and I are also Eastern Province boys. So how did it come about that you played for Eastern Province?
Yeah, I actually got my Western Province colours first, and but I played a low board for Western Province, and that was usually in interprovincials against Eastern Province. But then in 1982, I graduated with my BA from UCT, and I moved to do my honours in psychology at UPE. And just for 1 year, 1982, I was based then in PE and mixing with people like Ewan Kromhout and others. And you were probably a kind of a young boy, with an ambitious gleam in your eye at that moment. So I don't think we got to meet or play. And at that time in South Africa's history, that wasn't going to be very likely anyway. Those are the people. Vivian Wong was another player in Eastern Province at that time, a very strong player, although he was semi-inactive at the time I was there in 1982. So yeah, the Rentmeester, I think it was Ewan Kromhout, myself, Johnny Buchner, and Tibby Moses, I think, were the adult players. And a young lad called Brian Thompson was the junior representative at Rentmeester.
Right. Now, I must say that I met Ewan for the first time in around about 1990, 91, although his reputation, of course, preceded him. I mean, he's won the Eastern Province Open something like 17 times or something. And in fact, Prof, at the first Unity match, which took place on the 10th of December 1991, between PE Chess Club and my chess club, which was called Alekhine Chess Club at the time, we played. Board 1 was Kromot against Bauer, and we drew on that board. It was a Dutch. And on board 2, Vivian Wong beat Yanni Safir. So Vivian had come out of sort of semi-retirement and come to play. And we played at the PE Chess Club that was close to Fort Frederick. I don't know what that road is, but that's where the club was based at the time. So it was a lovely sort of evening there, because it was the first time that we got together, and Sandy Matthews was there, John Priest was there. I mean, all of those guys. I mean, we and that is. And after that, obviously, I still played for Eastern Province as well. I played one interprovincial for Eastern Province, and I've played about 14 for Western Province in subsequent years as well. Now, Prof, it sounds like you went 83, 84 to England. How did it come about?
1983, March 1983. I'd come to the end of my time at university at that time. So it was then a choice, do my 2 years Dienstpflicht in the apartheid army, or get the hell out of there. And I chose the latter route. I was fortunate in that my father is a Yorkshireman by background, so I had access through birth to a British passport.
Right.
But that was a decision. There was a bit of cloak and dagger stuff at the time.
Yes.
But in the end, I left the country on a two-way ticket, but never used the return.
Okay. Now tell me, Prof, reading your book, which is fantastic, by the way, the chess improvement amongst the. Is this your first chess book, or because I saw that you've written 10 books in total? You hit the weekend circuit there a bit, but you decided that wasn't for you. How did you? What was your results like in that weekend circuit?
Yeah, it's very kind to say I decided it wasn't for me. I think the weekend circuit decided I wasn't for it. I came out from South Africa, and I was never hugely successful in South Africa, but at provincial level I did okay, and even managed to win the occasional tournament. But when I hit the weekend circuit in that post-Fisher boom in the early 1980s in England, it was awesome, and I'm not just talking there of the circuit heroes that we had at the time, people like Colin Crouch and Mark Hepton and Keith Arkell and Julian Hodgson and McNabb, a whole bunch of really top players, most of whom went on to become grandmasters within a few years. But even the level below them, I was struggling. So if I'd ever had any thoughts that maybe I could survive on an occasional rating prize, I was quickly disabused of that notion, and I loved it. I travelled and I got to know the whole of the United Kingdom. I met some great people. I got ground down by Keith Arkell in a 70+ move endgame. And lots of people have suffered that fate against Keith Arkell.
Yeah,
played people like Julian Hodgson and McNabb and a whole bunch of really top players. Didn't get anything out of them, and decided after a few months, this has been wonderful, but I need to earn an honest living. And that was the moment I decided to effectively pack chess in and launch a career, initially in teaching and in education.
And how long has your break been? Has it been like 30 years?
Yeah, it's been over 3 decades. I mean, I did play a little bit of chess in my early years as a teacher. That would be in the late 80s and even running through into the early 90s. But it was kind of turn up on a club night, play a match, go home. There's no question of studying or, notions of improvement really went out the window when I left South Africa. I play a few games, enjoy chess, but really, it was the start of a 30-year break.
Now, Prof, what made you decide to write this great book, Chess Improvement? And I've been enjoying your analysis. You've quoted Carol, is it Carol Dweck, the American, and then you have and what I enjoyed was you sort of give some theory, and then Peter Wells comes and gives some of the practical side of things, and I've been enjoying, because of course it's not theory versus practice; they must complement one another. So what made you decide to write this wonderful book called Chess Improvement? It's all in the mindset.
Thank you. It's something of an accident. I never really thought I had any right to write a chess book. My playing strength was never much above 2000, and it's even a little bit less than that now in my old age. But I'm hoping still to improve a bit further. But I was getting towards the end of my career, which had been in psychology and education, as you mentioned. And as part of that, I had done quite a lot of work in the past with people like Professor Carol Dweck at Stanford University. My particular focus was on looking at applications of mindset theory in practice in education. Yeah. And when I was kind of moving towards the end of my career and determined to kind of get back into the chess world and rediscover my love for it after that really long break, I realized that actually a lot of my professional background did have something to offer notions of talent development in the chess world. Yeah. So it was a kind of a fusion, and I met I've always known Tim, since our days in the Southern schools chess, and we'd sort of kept in touch a little bit more so when I got back into the chess world. But Tim introduced me to Grandmaster Peter Wells at the British Championships about 5 years ago, and over a meal, we got talking about notions of improvement and how mindset might have something to say about it. And the three of us decided at that point to, try this out as a journey. Let's see if we can create something. And in the end, the book that you refer to was the eventual results of that collaboration.
Well, I must say I'm enjoying it, and it's giving me things to think about as well. So that is because I think South Africa, we of course have our acknowledged disadvantage in the education system, but at the same time, I'm also thinking about, is it a mindset? What do you need to improve? Is it your personality? And does your personality determine your openings? So there's a lot of those notions. And just to tell you that in the last few years, there's been a number of people who's actually completed academic qualifications. Dr. Omar Ieso did Checkmating HIV/AIDS, which was a fantastic doctoral thesis. Professor Bertie van Wyk did Memory and Recall in chess as his master's thesis in education, before he did Transformation Education as his main thesis. And then Dr. Denise Bauer, who's an woman international master, she did chess and psychology in a rehabilitation setting. So there's been a number of these studies that have come up, and I was thinking while reading your book that maybe it's time I must resurrect a virtual chess education type seminar where some of yourself and others could talk about, because what you are saying speaks to us, and also Peter coming with his practical examples, is also fantastic as well, Prof.
Thank you very much for that, Lyndon, and it's great working with Peter for that reason. He's got such a reputation in the chess world, and he's a deep thinker, a really, really deep thinker. And thank you for highlighting the point about mindset. And the one thing that I would really be keen to stress, given the impressive people who've done this work in these various fields, we must be very careful never to see mindset as, if you like, a substitute for social justice. Sometimes people assume that as long as your mindset's okay, you've only got yourself to blame, for letting your mindset be the wrong kind of mindset. And that's never been the case of Carol Dweck or her work. We have big questions that we need to address in the areas of social justice, but beyond that, it can be very powerful holding a growth mindset in the situations in which we find ourselves.
And I think one of the points that I was reading, because you also have those lovely tables that you put out where you say growth mindset or negative growth, and I was thinking about a statement that Grandmaster Kenny Solomon once made to me. South Africa's first Grandmaster, coming from Mitchell's Plain, not having it easy. But what Kenny did was, Kenny always said, even if the tournament has the worst conditions, everybody is playing under those same conditions, and he still has to give his best. And that, I think, has been for Kenny, in my opinion, a strength of his, that his mindset is still so strong that he wishes to persevere no matter what the circumstances.
Absolutely. I mean, it's tremendous having those examples, because Kenny's whole life gives witness to the fact of what natural talent combined with opportunity, and then all the character values that he has revealed in his journey to become South Africa's first Grandmaster. What together those can bring. Any one of those elements in itself is nice, but when they work together, well, wonderful things can happen.
100%. Prof, before I go to Calvin, I've a question that one of the guys asked me on the WhatsApp group, because we also, when I send out the ad, a lot of people ask me, so what does a chief of science actually do? And I said, you know what, I'm going to pose that question because, of course, with the website, you tell us a bit about what does a chief of science do at your website?
Yes, the website, the chess platform, Chessable, is a improvement platform. It's part of the Play Magnus group, which is hoovering up some really great resources in the chess world, including things like Chess 24 and many others. And Chessable is is, if you like, the education. It's the chess improvement arm of the Play Magnus group, and it was set up by David Kremali, who himself a chess player, but he really started with his own questions. How can I get better at chess as an adult? And he used spaced repetition system, which was the basis of Chessable. And just over a year ago, I was asked to become part of the team, as you say, in this role of Chief of Science. And my role there is to, make sure that we're looking at the best scientific research, studies, understanding of what underpins not just learning, but specifically chess learning. And what we're doing is we're either leading or we're supporting a range of research studies in a variety of areas. It's a great privilege, working with some of the top researchers in the field, people like Professor Naranja Balic and Naranja Bachi and Balic and Professor Roland Grabner. They're doing some fantastic work looking at issues to do with intelligence and the broader character aspects of chess development. And we're even doing a research study with the world's youngest grandmaster, Abhimanyu Mishra, at the moment, yes. Plus a number of in-house studies. So we're running studies, we're supporting studies, and we're just keeping an overview of what's out there and how can we use this information, to inform the development of our own platform, but also to disseminate good practice for chess players generally on an open source basis so that they can become stronger.
Prof, thank you very much for that, because you've just reminded me that there's a professor in the Free State, Prof. Peter Blighnout, who carried out an experiment at the SA Close in 2007 here in Cape Town, and I think Calvin may have participated in that study because it was his first close. And what Professor Blighnout did was to see where the eye movement is of top chess players in a position. And his analysis, of course, was that a amateur player below 2,000 looks the whole board, whereas a top player focuses on the key squares nearly instantaneously. And he has published that article as well. But listening to you now, I realize that a number of these studies may actually complement one another as well. And I'm sure some of the viewers may even alert me later on to other studies that has been done as well. But thank you very much. Now I also know what the Chief of Science does, with that one. So thanks, Prof. I'm going to take a break for 2 minutes and then just allow Calvin to pose some questions from the viewers. Thanks, Prof, from my side.
Thank you. Great pleasure. Thank you, Lyndon.
Calvin, over to you.
Yes, interesting stuff, guys. So I've been looking here at the chat box. We've got a few questions from Boom Shaka. There's the first one is, good evening, everyone. Question: what is one of your favorite books that you wrote? So what's your favorite book that you wrote?
That I wrote? There are many that I didn't write that I can nominate, but of my own, probably a book that I wrote with a couple of colleagues a few years ago called Learning Teaching. And it's just an attempt to synthesize the best evidence that we have around learning theory and what it looks like in practice. And it was a real labor of love. I really enjoyed that. And probably just at the other end of that, a very kind of short little book I wrote some years ago called the Growth Mindset Pocketbook. And that was an attempt to make the theory very practical for practicing teachers. And that sold really well. It's been a good resource. So that brings me much pleasure.
Okay, good stuff. Thanks for that, guys. Take your notes and go check it out. Let's see. Next question is from Dr. Queenie. Dr. Queenie says, "Good evening, Prof. Referring to mindset and keeping in mind Carol Dweck's work as well, would you say that chess players in general tend to have growth mindsets more so than fixed mindsets?"
In general, I think they probably do, but that plenty of us have fixed mindsets too. And I know that when I was a South African chess player, I would say that my mindset was predominantly very fixed. At that time, that I thought that chess talent was really, genetically given or God-given, and in the end, your chess performance would reflect your natural talent. And so I saw great players like Roger Shakis and David Freetwood and others doing wonderful things, Charles de Villiers, David Walker. And I thought, oh, these guys, Donald McFarlane, who's a few years younger than me, but was coming on the scene at that time. And I thought that these guys just have natural talent without actually at that time seeing behind the scenes the amount of work they were putting in as well. And the more you get to know top chess players, and in our book, we interviewed quite extensively the top UK chess players, English chess players of the last 20, 30 years, people like Nigel Short, Michael Adams, Garwayne Jones, Luke McShane, Matthew Sadler, Harriet Hunt, our top players, and they're workaholics. If not all the time, at certain stages in their careers, they're putting huge amounts of work. And I think to reach those levels, like those elite players, you have to be, putting in the hours. So I think most chess players, particularly the ambitious ones who want to improve, definitely have growth mindsets rather than fixed mindsets. It's not to say we don't sometimes, have those fixed mindset moments, but we do in the book mention a few great players who the evidence suggests probably did have fixed mindsets, but despite that became great players. And I'll nominate people like Sami Reshevsky, the late great American player of the mid-20th century. And a lot about his behavior revealed itself to have fixed mindset overtones. And probably one of the greatest, most naturally talented players of all time, Jose Capablanca of Cuba. Everyone who knew him and who looks at his games regard him as a sublimely gifted natural talent. But he wasn't a worker compared to many other people, who put in the hours. And as a result, despite his brilliance, he wasn't world champion for anything like as long as his predecessor and his successor, who are known to be, particularly Alekhine, huge workaholics. So yes, I would say chess players, because they live in the domain of challenge and hard work and effort, and they see what's needed to improve, tend to have growth mindsets, but it's by no means universal. And because mindset is a continuum, we can have a stronger growth mindset than perhaps we have at any particular stage in our lives.
Interesting stuff. Thanks so much, Prof. And just a slight follow-up to that. I'm going to get back to the other questions up here, guys. But I just see Dr. Queenie just added to this here just now. She says, just a follow-up on my question. Would you say that the mindsets differ among the various levels of strength, say GM, IM to club level?
We haven't got data on that. It's something we would like to get. I can see where the question comes from. It's a very, very plausible question, and there's a great doctoral hypothesis in there. If you'd like to get in touch with me, I'd love to supervise, some extensive research in this. But I can see where the hypothesis comes from. I don't think it's going to be clear cut. I think even at beginner level, coaches would tell me they can spot young kids who have the passion, the intrinsic motivation. They're not particularly fussed about their ratings as much as their peers are. And these are the kids, I would say, who are revealing growth mindsets. And if they keep them and they keep their love of chess, I would predict are going to go on to achieve better things in chess than those who are driven by their ratings only and beating others and getting lots of success and are less interested in the processes of learning. So I think even at earlier levels, you will find a very mixed picture. It won't be anything like as unidirectional as weaker players' fixed mindset, grandmasters' growth mindset. It will be much more nuanced than that.
Yes. Thanks for that. Okay, thanks for that. That was quite a nice discussion there for Dr. Queenie. And then coming back to Boomshaka's question, she was saying, yeah, just want to squeeze in my last question. What do you consider chess to be? Sport, science, or art?
In fact, I've written a blog post on just that question for the Chessable platform. I'm going to take the cop out over here. All of those things, because you can make a case in every domain, and in fact, even at the level of style, you can identify top players. You know, the artists of this world, the Ivanchuks of this world. You can spot the scientists of this world in people like Botvinnik, you know, and that relentless focus on the engineering architecture of chess. And then you can go to the sportsmen, and I'd include people like Carlsen in that. You know, anyone who plays some of the ridiculous openings he plays for fun is playing coffee house chess at a level of gamesmanship in the best sense, of a sublime level. So I would go for all of those major domains. It does remind me, by the way, back in the day, in the late 1970s, I was with a few colleagues at UCT Chess Club trying to make a case to our sports council that chess was definitely a sport. And the reason we were trying to make that case was there was a lot of funding we could have got as a chess club if they'd agreed that it was a sport, but just got hardly anything. I think the most we got in my 3 years at UCT was the loan of a combi to go up to play in the Founders Open in Zimbabwe, and of course Rhodesia. So they lent us that. That was great. But when you look at what the rugby clubs and the other sports clubs got, we could have done a lot with something of that. So there was self-interest behind our case for chess as a sport.
Thanks so much, Prof. Interesting stuff over there once again. And then one last question here in the chat. What do you consider some of your greatest achievements, work and chess?
Thank you. My chess achievements are very modest. So I'm going to say in chess terms, I'm proudest of the book I co-wrote with Peter Wells and Tim Katz, because it provided an opportunity for me to put my professional knowledge into a chess context. And nobody's going to be playing my chess games 50 years from now. There are many better games to waste your time on than Barry Hymer's chess games. So in chess terms, I think that will definitely be my legacy if I have one in the chess world. And in professional terms, I think it is the work that I've tried to do on making the theory of mindset have practical relevance in the classroom. And some of the things that we managed in my last 10 to 15 years as an academic, I'm proudest of in that domain.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for that. And I think that's all for now in the chat box. Thanks everyone for the questions. Over to you, Dr. Bauer.
Thank you, Calvin. And I must tell you, Professor Hymer, that perhaps Dr. Queenie needs to do a second doctorate, because she's got a doctorate in psychology, and maybe she needs to chat to you on
that explains why he's asking such potent questions.
Yes, in fact, Dr. Queenie is a Women International Master, so I do know her quite well.
Brilliant. Better still.
No, we'll get around to that. So now, Prof, of course, I've got about 3 stock questions that I have to ask all my interviewees. Number 1, what were your 3 favorite chess books that you studied when you were out there being a teenager?
Yeah, I don't know if you remember, Lyndon. You're much younger than me, but when I was a boy, there weren't that many chess books. So
Reinfeld probably dominated.
Absolutely. I tried my best with Nimzovich. I got hold of my system and my practice, but I promise you, I was asleep before I managed to get more than 3 pages into that. Brilliant as it is, and as an adult, I've come back to it. But my 3 favorite ones would be the cliche of 60 Memorable Games by Bobby Fischer, just for the clarity of his writing and the concreteness of his analysis. He's such a lucid writer as well as a chess player. And then you might remember Bell and Sons used to do those pure red hardcover books.
Yes.
Alekhein's best games and Capablanca's best games. And I had both of those. And they were mainstays. I understood probably 20% of the annotations, but I loved them.
No, Prof, thanks for that. I will tell you that one day Calvin came to visit my house and he discovered some of those books in my library because, of course, when I was growing up, algebraic was only coming in then, and we still had descriptive books. So all of these Bell books were the descriptive books, and of course, I mean, I had to literally I had the Bell books, and then I also had, is it HRM Press? There was also HRM Press, and I studied Tull's best games from that one, and then of course I also had Fisher's all Fisher's games by Wade and O'Connell.
Yes.
As well, a tome of about 800 games at the stage. I must tell you, Prof, that I'm busy studying, not studying really, but playing through it with a glass of wine. Andy Salter's Bobby Fischer Rediscovered.
I want to read that. Yeah. It's been very well reviewed.
And there's some rare games. Yes, and there's some games that I've never seen, not even in 60 memorable games, because Salter says Fisher had to decide which of these games makes it, but he's got 100 Fisher games in that book, and this time with analysis, unlike the Wade and O'Connell only had limited analysis on that one. But of course, Alekine's best games and all those other ones, as you said, I mean, they for me, a lot of the people that we interviewed said this, and they also even added the Zurich 53. Yes. That also seemed to have been a favorite as well.
I didn't have that at the time that I was a kid, but it is now one of my favorite books, particularly the version in Batsford, which is down to Bronstein later on. You know, he said some strange things about it. He said basically, I didn't write the book. You know, I just did a few of the annotations. And it was very strange, but he was a very strange man. But brilliant, absolutely brilliant. The chess struggle practice is the version I've got.
Now, Prof, growing up in the 70s, would it be fair to say that Fischer and Karpov were two of your favorite players, or who would you say would be your top three players?
Yeah, not Karpov. You know, I didn't understand him. You know, I wasn't strong enough to understand his prophylaxis, and it bored me to death. But you know, as I became a bit stronger, I began to appreciate him much more. Now, Fischer, for the clarity and his personality and style, you know, I know that he went, you know, sadly off the rails in later life. But you know, the young Fischer and the chess fanatic Fischer was absolutely my hero. And just towards the end of my school days, a very young Gary Kasparov was coming on the scene. You know, and we were all talking about this young kid coming up. And boy, didn't he live up to his early promise.
Yeah, no. For you know, one of the early books that I actually bought was Fighting Chess, and was a lovely sort of green cover that they had. And when I spoke about Kasparov going to Banja Luka at the age of 15 and simply winning the Grandmaster tournament ahead of everybody else, I mean, those are just fantastic. Yep, there it is. That's the one. Fighting Chess. Prof has that one as well. I mean, it's one of those books you've got to have in your library.
Yeah, absolutely, and including the ones that you mentioned, the O'Connell ones. I eventually even got Karpov's collected games, you know, and when I get banished to my desert island someday, you know, I'm going to take that one with me. It's going to keep me going for the rest of my life. And by the end of it, maybe I'll even understand.
Yes, no. Well, I must tell you that I've been fortunate to have met both K's, Karpov and Korchnoi, and Grandmaster Karpov visited my university at the University of the Western Cape, 1993. He came to South Africa as a member, he was a member of the Duma, and he was a guest of the history department at UWC, and he made a few speeches here and so forth. So fantastic person we got to meet. And then, of course, in 2012, I played a simul against Kasparov here in Cape Town, in Khayelitsha. We played at Muirway on the N2. So every time I drive on the N2, I see Muirway and I see Kasparov. And that was where a 12-year-old by the name of Daniel Barish drew with Kasparov. And of course, Barish,
we know what happened to him.
Yes. And
what a wonderful experience. I've only met Kasparov once. I was at a literature festival a few years ago, and he was speaking about the book that he was publishing at that time on computer chess and the future. And I met him at a book signing afterwards. But earlier on, speaking to 3,000 people, he'd said, I don't know if any of you are actually chess players, and no one put their hand up. So when I saw him at the book signing, I stupidly said to him, hi, Mr. Kasparov, I'm a chess player like you. And he looked up at me and he thought for a little while and he said, I very much doubt it. And I deserved that. I say, what I mean was I also play chess, but not to your level. But no, he had a little smile in his face. He had a great sense of humor.
Yes, no, I think you still has that as well. And of course, Calvin, you may not be aware, but in 2023, Mr. Kasparov turned 60 in 2023, 2 years from now as well. So I keep tabs on him, Prof. Hymer, because his birthday is one day before mine. So I kind of, yeah, kind of pitch that one. Now, Prof, what is next now after chess improvement? What one or two little secret projects you have going there that you want to share with your South African and African viewers?
Thank you. Nothing particularly secret. I'm very much enjoying my work with Chessable. It has interrupted my own attempts to get better at chess in my, old age. But I'm quite happy with that. The writing that I'm doing is almost exclusively now in the form of blog posts for the science pages of Chessable. But that's keeping me very busy, and I'm loving researching areas like resilience, the role of intelligence, looking at learning styles for a future blog, those kinds of things. And maybe at some time in the future, I'll gather a few of those things together and see if there's something worthwhile that we can make out of them. But that's where my at least my creative energies in the academic side are going at the moment.
No, we will certainly look forward, Prof, because I will probably send you one or two articles that I've written over the last 5 years.
Please do.
One of the things that I'm very proud about in one of my chess articles, I researched chess on Robben Island. And I actually found that Mr. Zuma, when he was doing 10 years on the island, actually played chess on board 6 for his chess team on Robben Island.
Wow.
So there's some interesting little insights there. And hopefully one day when you can persuade Malcolm Payne with the London, if they have that London chess conference, I would dearly love to come and talk about chess on Robben Island and chess in South Africa, of course, and what it has meant here for us generally.
That would be fascinating. And wouldn't it be wonderful if Madiba had been given a copy of Fisher's Collected Games on day one of his 27 years? Yeah. that would have kept him entertained for that period.
Well, in fact, one of the fellow Ravonia trialists, Mr. Ahmed Kathrada, who also spent close to 26 years in prison, actually said that Madiba was a very long chess player who thought for days on his moves. So Mr. Kathrada was recounting this in some of the interviews that they were having with him and his recollection with Mr. Zuma. And then, of course, you had quite a few of the prisoners at Robben Island. And one of the interesting things was that in 1972, the Olympic Games was taking place in Germany at the time, and the prisoners were allowed to have a summer games recreation activity, and they chose chess as one of the games.
Great.
So it was very interesting that even through the prison walls, chess also emerged as well. And one day when we have a chance to meet over a meal, because I saw that's how you and Peter Wells started your book, then I will also have a meal with you and tell you a bit about some of that writings as well.
That would be wonderful to break bread together. Can I just mention, Lyndon, it's not particularly chess related, but it does relate to what you're talking about. And chess in prisons is quite a big and strong movement over here in the United Kingdom. But my father's only regret, he died at the age of 95 a couple of years ago, but his only regret was that he turned down the invitation to become the chaplain to the prisoners on Robben Island. And he did that because he said, I will be privileged and honored to do that, but I would insist when I minister to them on not having a prison guard present. And that could never be agreed. So on that basis, he turned it down, but he said I was stupid.
Yeah,
I should still have accepted it. But it would have been a tremendous opportunity to get to know the future leaders of his country.
Yes, no, for certain. But Prof, thank you very much for that. And from my side, I mean, it's been fantastic to hear you speak. I'm sure we're going to engage with you again. And in particular, I think, Prof, I'm going to be promoting your book quite vigorously here in South Africa as well, because I do think even just last week, my wife, Dr. Denise Bauer, she was giving some tips to somebody in the chess community who's going to do an honors thesis in psychology about chess. And she was
Right.
giving the lady some pointers. And it is interesting that now that we've heard you speak, that I must actually tell that lady to perhaps just give you an email or send
Please
you a
do.
note on what she's doing.
I'd be
Because I
very
think
interested.
what you're talking about with a growth mindset is what she's very similarly attempting to do here on a local level as well. Prof, a
I'd be
last
very
question
interested.
before we go to the games. Have you been to any Olympiads?
I haven't. No, I listened to my friend Tim Kett talking about his experiences at Olympiads, and I'm lost in admiration. When I met Nigel Short, we tried to strike up a plan where I'd be strong enough to play for a country, and we had a look at all the countries that I might have been strong enough to represent at the Olympiads. There were a few, but not very many. But Nigel came up with the idea of, why don't you create a new country in the former Soviet Union? We'll call it Kazakhstan. And maybe you can be top ball for Kazakhstan. So that's as close as I've ever got to an Olympiad.
No, I'm sure we'll be able to chat with you one day, and hopefully at the next few Olympiads you'll be able to see us. And of course, Calvin participated in the last two in 2016 and 2018, and of course, South Africa has a wonderful Olympiad history, having played in the first one in '58 already. And then of course there's some lovely famous pictures of Leonard Witstein and others that went to the '66 Olympiad as well, meeting Fidel Castro and others as well. But Prof, from my side, I'd like us to go over to the games, because of course one of the things on the show is that we always do 2 games or so with our guests, so that people can see that our guests can also play a bit of chess. Doesn't matter where they're playing now, but they are playing some chess there. So, Prof, from my side, I'm going to hand you back over to Calvin. So, thank you very much from my side.
Thank you very much, Lyndon. It'll be a great pleasure. Thank you.
Super. Calvin,
Okay.
over to you.
Right, so let's switch over to the chessboard, guys. Okay, we at the chessboard, and where shall we start, Professor? Where shall we start? With which game?
Well, shall we start with the game JJ Leica?
Yes, you've got the black pieces, right?
I've got the black pieces against JJ Leica, and the reason I chose this one, Calvin, is because on one of the WhatsApp groups that Lyndon referred to, there has been some discussion in recent weeks about memories of JJ Leica and his son Helmut, who was an even stronger player than his father. And I believe that there's another Leica still around called Otto. And it reminded me that I actually played him once, and this was in, as I say, my first open tournament when I was quite a young schoolboy, back in 1976. This was the South African Open, and I played him in round 6.
Okay.
And he was quite elderly at that time, but still rated 1954, and my rating at that time was a measly 1510. So I think he probably underestimated me, but this was the game.
Okay, fantastic. So shall we start? Here we go.
So it becomes a Sicilian Dragon. I was playing the Dragon quite a lot at that time, and it starts off uneventfully, but I soon get it wrong.
One of my favorites. One of my classic.
One of your favorites.
Yes.
Yeah, but unfortunately, you play it a lot better than I ever did.
No, you see, I used to play it when I was young, and then at some point I got mated too many times during critical tournaments, and I decided to actually play a normal opening.
Is that right? Yeah, lots of fun either side, but lots of pyrotechnics. So he goes into the kind of Yugoslav variation, and all fairly okay, for both sides up to here. But you could see he's got aggressive intentions. He's going for the full queenside castling, and he's going to throw his kingside pawns up. And I made probably a fairly strange move over here. I look at it nowadays, and I think rook e8. What kind of a mortis is that? It's not particularly thematic, and it's taking a possible square away from the knights. I probably should have looked more at worrying the bishop with a knight move to e5 or to
Yes.
a5. But anyway, here we go. Rook e8, and I think he castles out, doesn't he?
Yep.
And again, I play kind of a hybrid Najdorf dragony kind of move, and I look at this now. I think, oh, those dark squares. They're looking pretty desperate. It's not a blunder, but it's looking a bit odd. And I think he saw an opportunity here, and so he exchanges knights, and then he goes for the pawn push to e5.
Okay.
You can see what he's doing. He's taken advantage of the fact my rooks aren't connected yet, and so I'm going to apparently struggle, but it's not so bad. I won't say I went into this deliberately, but it turns out not to be too bad for me. I've got to go back to d7. Other moves, obviously, even worse. And he pushes again. But actually, knight and e5, yes, white's still got a good edge, but black's living.
Yes.
Obviously, I'm going to take if he doesn't take himself, but it's all right. He's got that diagonal. But after all this, I've actually now got potentially quite a good center, and it's probably not as overwhelming for white. I mean, white's obviously still fine, but not as overwhelming as he thought it was going to be.
Yes.
So he goes for the H file. He wants to obviously open up the H file, and he pushes H4. But of course, I now get my D5 in to try and take away that nasty diagonal from the bishop. And at this point, as I recall, he had quite a long think, and you could see he's not the kind of person to take backward steps. Obviously, it would be better for him to retreat the bishop to B3, or maybe even play something like Queen E1 or Queen F2, take advantage of the pin on the D file. But after a long think, he thought, no, come on, I've got to blow black open, and he went for it.
Okay.
The knight takes D5.
Okay, here we go.
Here we go.
Yep.
But I think he's underestimating the dragon bishop. So after we take back, and he should probably have taken with the queen and just cut his losses over here. It's still now better for black. This was an unsound sacrifice. But he's probably still thinking that he's got all these potential open lines on that diagonal. Surely there must be something on for him. But he played the riskier move. He took with the bishop.
Yep.
And of course, I'm going to play rook to b8 to keep an eye on that b2 square. And now he realized his position's not all that pretty. He should probably put something in the way, push a pawn, maybe even retreat the bishop and invite the exchange of queen. But obviously he didn't want to take that route. So he thought in for a penny, in for a pound, and he made matters even worse. So he exchanged on f7. I take, and I think he just basically miscalculated the combination over here because he seemed quite confident at this point. But as you can see, Calvin, because you would have seen this 3 or 4 moves ago, after I take on b2, he might as well go to d2 because b1's not any better. He did play b1.
Just by the way, for the viewers, d2 cuts off the life supply over there, so you can just snap off the queen.
I'll snap off the queen, and I'm a happy piece up.
Yes.
But I think the move he must have missed earlier on was just the retreat of the bishop to d4,
Beautiful.
which takes the b6 square away from him. Because if I didn't have that, either now or I could have taken the queen first and then done it, he would have been sitting pretty, would have been quite fine. But no, he's busted. He's just going to be a piece down, and he could really have resigned at this point. But he played king to c1. I took the bishop on e3. He retreated his queen, which obviously I'll snap off. And at this point, once you get bishop e6,
it's just a matter of technique now.
It's technique, and not even much of that, because rook e over to c8. I think he'd given up by this point, and obviously bishop to f5. And at this point, he'd taken enough punishment from this little kid. And I chose this game, not a great game, but because it reminded me that there was a time in history when actually I was the underrated junior, because I'm being beaten up by so many underrated juniors nowadays. It's good to remind myself that I had my turn. My turn.
Interesting. Interesting little miniature over there. And it's interesting that, your opponent kind of initiated everything and you just accepted everything and continued to play brilliantly. So.
Well, brilliant is very kind and very generous, but you're absolutely right. He was going all out to crush this little upstart sitting opposite him. It is very sound play. He's played some great games in his time, but obviously he pushed too far. He was way too optimistic in this game. And in a sense, he gave it to me on a plate.
Yes, and you know what they say about the Dragon? I think they probably say that about a lot of openings, certain openings with the same features. But when you play the Sicilian Dragon, then it's not about who's the stronger player anymore. It's about who's the better Sicilian Dragon player.
Ah,
Okay.
makes sense.
So
That
ratings,
makes sense.
nothing doesn't matter. It's about who plays the Sicilian Dragon better. So
That's almost tempting me to take up the Sicilian Dragon, Calvin. Thank you.
I might join you again on that one. Cool game. Well done.
And
I mean, one of the interesting things, of course, with if you look at the game quickly, then it's interesting how that rook e8 probably would now just be frowned upon.
Yeah.
But at the same time, Prof, you mentioned a6, and Calvin will tell you that nowadays some of the youngsters call that the Dragendorf or something like that. You know, where theory has evolved. You know that you can play a6 with knight c6 unbelievably, whereas you wouldn't have contemplated that. Everybody would have gone knight e5, bishop d7, rook c8, and you know, get the normal things. But you so. Prof, you might have been ahead of your time.
I was ahead of my time, Lyndon. I'm delighted to know that. I never saw myself as a theoretician, but who knows? You know, maybe I was for one brief moment.
Yes. Now let's look at that second game, Calvin.
Good stuff. Okay, let's get the other game going.
Yeah. So that first game was from really the very start of my undistinguished chess career, and this game is much more recent, towards the end of it. And just the context for this, I was playing in the National Chess League in the United Kingdom, which is called the Four Nations Chess League, and in the top divisions, top players internationally playing this, and Guildford have won it for many years. But at this time, I was playing in the third division North for a team called the Manchester Manticores, and we were duking it out for the title of the third division North champions with a team from White Rose that actually Peter plays for. Peter Wells plays for the first team, and White Rose 2 were just ahead of us most of the way, but got to the final round 11 of this year-long tournament, and we were on level pegging. And as it turns out, we were actually playing each other on the very final match of the season. And we did discover that the night before, because they outrated us on every board by a fair bit, they actually held a little celebration, and they had a cake made and they partied late into the night. And we just thought, this is motivation for us to make it hard for them, because I think they thought they were going to win comfortably. And this was the first game to finish. And at one point, we were 3-0 up in a 6-board match.
Wow.
And unfortunately, they pulled their way back to 3-3. So we tied for the title that year. But this was the first game, and I was playing white on this occasion.
Okay.
Sure.
Here we go. And we have a Dutch defense.
I was aiming for a King's Indian attack, but my opponent had won all his games in the season, and he was an aggressive player, very good, sharp tactical player. So he went for the Dutch. He was clearly out for blood. So I played a little line which I'd recently come across, and I think it's been played quite extensively early on by Magnus himself. It's to get that D3 in and to follow it with a quick E4, and ultimately to get D4 in. So Bach's response is perfectly reasonable. He plays D6 and now E5. I played my knight out to C3, and he plays knight to F6. He could have played knight to C6. They're equally good. Now, Magnus's innovation here, which has been taken on by a lot of players, was to exchange on F5 and then to move the d-pawn a second time to open up lines. And it turns out that white gets a quite nifty little edge in all the theory lines in this position over here. There's lots of things black can do. Probably the most aggressive and possibly the best is to advance the pawn to e4, which he did. I played my knight to h4, obviously hitting the bishop. He's got to do something about that. He plays it very naturally to g4, and this is all theory. And I was rattling out the moves over here, and I had a sense that he wasn't as familiar with these as I was. So I played bishop to e2, And it actually does set black a few problems. If he exchanges, which is probably best, white's going to recapture with the queen, and then there's going to be a lot of pressure on that e4 square. Black's probably going to play d5, and then white's going to play bishop g5, hitting that f6 knight with a nasty pin. And now almost everything, I wouldn't say loses, but comes pretty close. Anything like bishop e7 or c6, there's going to be knight coming in on f5. Black's got to go for it with bishop to b4, fighting fire with fire. And then we're going to really hairy lines, beginning with queen b5 check, knight c6, and then taking on b7, taking on d4, etc. Because if you take the bishop, there's going to be a nasty pin on c2. And this goes on. And in the end, if both sides play optimal moves, white ends up with a very healthy plus.
Okay.
And I think my opponent realized that I did know this line, and he wasn't keen to go into that. So if we can just take that back to bishop e2. At this point, he had this long think, and then he played bishop back to d7.
Okay.
And I don't think he'd been thinking that one through. I think he'd spent all his time calculating what happens if I take on e2,
Yes.
and white gets an f3 push and a pin. And of course, white's got a very nasty little move now, which the computer takes a little time to see, but it's bishop h5. And we're now forcing black into a the wrong end of a white piece sacrifice, which really compromises his king quite badly. So he's pretty much forced to play g6. Of course, I take with a knight just to get that king out. Bishop takes g6, and king obviously to e7. And I've lost the piece. I've already got a couple of pawns for it. I'm going to get more. So bishop to g5 is a fairly obvious pinning move with some nasty threats. Pretty much forces bishop to g7. Yes. Now, I had a bit of a think, because I'm well out of my own theory now. In fact, I didn't know the theory since he retreated his bishop to b7, but it plays itself very, very easily.
Yeah.
I had a long think. Should I just go castle, worry about that pawn later? But in the end, I decided to grab that pawn. So I've already now got 3 pawns. Knight takes e4 for the piece, plus a king position, which is obviously denuded of any pawn cover.
Yes.
So he had a little think. He had quite a long think, and he played d5, which I was expecting. And at this moment, I banged out my immediate response, which was queen to f3. And that shocked him quite a bit. And he had a good 10-minute think.
Kind of unexpected.
It's a bit unexpected, because he thought, what, I'm just giving up another piece. And obviously it's not sound giving up another piece if he takes it and I just recapture on e4. But what he hadn't seen, of course, was the immediate queen to a3 check after he took the knight. So he took the knight with d takes e4 and queen a3 check, and I could see him visibly pale at this moment, because he'd clearly overlooked, the raking bishops and the effect it has on his king. Forces him out to e6.
Oh my!
Obviously, if he pushes the pawn in the way, I'm just going to mate him very quickly on e5. But I've now got a lovely ladder, So yeah, if you play c5, I just take and mate on e5.
Yeah.
So he's forced into e6, but I've now got a ladder on b3. Back again, b4. Back again. And obviously now, if he does it one more time, I'm back on c5 with a mate on e5.
Nice.
So it forces him to give up his queen for 3 pieces, plus a shed load of pawns. He's obviously totally lost now, but he still thought maybe he could swindle his way, and it was embarrassing to give up too soon when all his teammates were, still in the opening. I took the pawn. He defends it with c6. I've got a castle long, and I'm going to get both my rooks into action if I get the chance. He had a little think. He realized that once I get rook h e1 in, it's curtain, so he thought I've got to run for cover. He moves back to f7, pick up another pawn on d5, another one. And at this moment, he realizes he's sunk. He goes back to f8 because he can't bear the e file coming with tempo. Rook to d3 with some killer threats. Just tries to give himself some cover with the bishop because he hasn't got any pawns on f6. Of course, I'll go to f3 anyway. Forces out to g7, give him a check on g3. And he's only got h6 now, otherwise I'm going to be mating him but after Queen D6, there's no hiding place, and it's over. So I was quite pleased. I was quite pleased with that. I'm not very good at my openings, so it's quite rare for me to actually, spring a little surprise and to get a really strong position out of the opening. And I really needed it in that game to get us off to a really good start.
Very, very nice game. I like it. I should actually recheck that line. I remember looking at that, Carlson. There's one game I saw of Carl Magnus, the young Magnus, playing that line and bringing back fond memories here. And maybe I should also look at this against the Dutch from now.
Yeah, no, it's a nice little line. Black can delay his Dutch a little bit, and
yes,
can find his way around it that way. But if he goes straight for it, you've got all the potential of a really nice open line to white.
Great.
So if you use that in the next Olympiad, I'll be expecting my commission, please.
Yes, no, definitely. I'll show you.
If that's okay, Calvin.
I'll send you a notification. Yes.
That'd be great. That'd be great.
Excellent stuff. Great flow to the game, Barry.
But now, Barry, I mean, I must say that this all of a sudden, I'm looking at the pawn tally, Calvin. There's 7 pawns for white on the board there, and if you look closely, you'd remember that Prof took a pawn on e4, and then another pawn appeared on e4. Yes. So you've got it, and then of course this little stairway, Led Zeppelin stairway to heaven, and then all of a sudden coming in there. A wonderful little game, and I'm sure you've taught a great number of us a new little opening variation that we're going to store up. So maybe my Staunton Gambit is not going to be played so often against the Dutch anymore.
Still good, Lyndon. Still good, the Staunton.
Prof, thanks very much for these 2 lovely games, and also just for your reflections from the 4 nations as well. I mean, those are the type of things that why we have the show, so that people, ordinary players, not quite in a Kasparov mold, but ordinary players can show their games to us as well. So, Prof, thank you from my side. I've thoroughly enjoyed the interview and, of course, the games as well.
It's been a great pleasure, Lyndon and Calvin. Thank you very much for the opportunity. And can I thank you guys for the wonderful historical record that you're putting together over these seasons. It's a great joy and an honor to be part of that.
Fantastic. Thanks so much from my side also, Prof. Great to have you with us this evening. It's been wonderful. A privilege to have you with us. Thanks for taking out your time for joining us. And also thanks to Dr. Bauer for organizing all these prestigious guests on the show. So if you can just hang on for one more moment, I just need to ask Dr. Bauer, who are we seeing next week on Reflections?
So yes, Calvin, tonight we went to England with Prof. Hymer. Last week we were in Florida with Prof. Shabazz. The week prior we were in Spain with GM Strikovic. Then we had I am Abusela from Pretoria, South Africa. And then we had Mr. Lawrence Ball from England. So next week we're going a bit to our neighbors in Mozambique. And a friend of, he was an opponent, and now he's also a friend from Mozambique. Mr. Mateus is one of Mozambique's top players, and we've seen each other at many events, and he's agreed to be interviewed about chess in Mozambique. And Prof. Hymer will perhaps recall that back in the day, in the 68 and 70s, there used to be a famous Lorenzo Marx tournament. And that tournament used to attract some of South Africa's top players. And in fact, Calvin and Prof, of course, that was before 75, and even today, chess is still very strong in Mozambique as well, and they hosted a great number of tournaments. So we're looking forward to come back to Africa, as it were, next week and Tuesday night here on the show. But Calvin, I must tell you that the week after that we go back to to the UK, and I'll reveal that guest, who is a friend of Prof. Hymer. I'll reveal that guest next week, but at least, so we're going intercontinental, Calvin. That's what we're busy doing now, the reflections, but all with a South African or African connection in that regard. But Prof, from my side, again, thank you to you, and the viewers quite enjoyed, and I think I'm going to be putting you in touch with a couple of our viewers here because of the things that you were saying and some of the things that they are busy researching. You may be able to be of some assistance as well. Calvin, I leave it to you. Thanks, Prof.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Dr. Boa. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Have a great evening. See you guys next time. Cheers.
Thank you so much.
Thank
you. Bye-bye.
Bye.